And we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So today I'm going to be reviewing an interaction between Piers Morgan and Alan Dershowitz. Now, if there's anyone who knows me, I really don't like Piers Morgan. I think he's a terrible person. I think he just brings on certain guests to his show to have a shouting match with them. It doesn't really do anything productive. But like the saying goes, a broken clock can be right twice in a day. And this interaction that Piers Morgan had with Alan Dershowitz sort of just um, encapsulated that idea. It expressed that idea that however terrible Piers Morgan is, at times he can be eliminating. And this conversation they had was about Trump's plan to turn Gaza into a resort, to forcefully remove, whether forcefully or whatever, to remove ethnically cleanse Gaza of Palestinians, of the Arabs that are there, and turn it into some sort of a resort. And it was just brilliant how Piers Morgan was able to poke holes in this idea that even Alan Dershowitz himself was supporting, hailing it as is out of the box thinking. So I'm going to share that interaction now and just react to it as we go. It's crazy that anyone would even suggest something like that. Hey Stanley, how you doing? Welcome to the show. So let's go. Yeah. So maybe I think I'll just bring Stanley up. Maybe we can react to it together. Right. As I give my thoughts, he gives his thoughts. But so Stanley, if you'd like to join, the link is there. But let me just start. Yep.
On the face of it, as with many of Trump's statements, everyone goes completely nuts. They all think it's completely insane, and it follows a familiar pattern. And then you find out that what he really means turns out to be something rather more diluted and palatable because he's a trader at heart. What is your reaction to this, though? It's so dramatic. It stunned the world. But is there merit or method to the apparent madness?
Well, it certainly.
We just answered that there is no method or merit to any insane thing that Trump is doing. He's just breaking things, right? It might seem as if there is a grander plan to what he is doing, but so far there is. I don't see the sense. I don't see the sense in him saying he wants to remove the people of Gaza, or does he want to scare them with being refugees for the second time into just accepting? Okay, you know what? We don't want the two states. Just give us Gaza. Just give us Gaza and we're okay. Because now he's threatening to even remove them from Gaza. Some of them were refugees from Israel proper itself. Now he wants them to become refugees in other people's countries. So is that what he's aiming for? I don't understand.
Shocked me and surprised me. I've been in this area for years and years and years. This is the first bold, new, out of the box thinking about Gaza, and it shouldn't be rejected out of hand. It's reminiscent of Churchill and Roosevelt's view at the end of the Second World War to transfer millions of Sudeten Germans out of their land they had lived in for hundreds of years in Czechoslovakia and move them back to Germany. Or the thinking of Nehru and others when England gave up India and Pakistan.
So for me, just because something happened in the past doesn't make it okay. I personally would have been and I am today against what happened to the Germans who were in other parts of Europe who were transferred to Germany proper, because that is collective punishment. What did they have to do with what Nazi Germany did? That is collective punishment. It it may have happened in that time and it was allowed to happen, but it was an injustice. Those people had lived in those lands just because people who share the same language with them, who share the same ethnicity with them, did something terrible. Was not enough justification to remove them from the land that they were and take them back to Germany, right? So I don't see how this can be a case to be made. It means that if anybody can be removed from wherever they are because someone who shares a certain characteristic with them did something. It doesn't make sense. Stanley, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree with you. And then the bigger thing is you're going to create more terrorists.
Mhm.
They're not gonna, they're if they weren't terrorists before, that's going to be a great recruiting tool. I mean,
Exactly.
Hamas is not going to go away.
Certainly not. Yeah.
Transfers of populations against the wishes of the people, but it produced an enduring peace in Central Europe, the transfer of the Sudeten Germans, and it produced an enduring peace, not perfect peace in either cases, and with high costs and high prices. Or consider
But it doesn't mean that if those Germans were not transferred, that there wouldn't have been peace in Europe. If those Sudeten Germans were not transferred, it's not a guarantee that they were going to cause trouble. They were going to foment trouble. It's so I don't get the idea that that was what guaranteed peace in Europe. It's crazy.
the decision of Russia to take over Königsberg, an old German city, and to remove all the German residents of Königsberg and to repopulate the city, rename it Kaliningrad, repopulate it with Russians, and annex it to the Soviet Union. There's precedent for this. I think it's an idea that's worth thinking about, and its variations. There are so many possible variations. For example, you can do it piece by piece. You can clear out an area of Gaza, remove the population, clean it up, get rid of all the tunnels, then repopulate it with Gazans who would agree that they are not going to engage in terrorism. They're not going to join Hamas. Look, the alternatives.
So before I get Stanley to react to this, let me just say something. What this guy essentially is saying that he is looking at the precedent of previous ethnic cleansing as justification for current ethnic cleansing. It doesn't make any sense. Just because it was done before doesn't mean it should be done now. Now, on the other part, you said okay, let's clear out this part and then allow the Palestinians back in. Now, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That was part of the thing. That was part of what happened with the Palestinians becoming refugees in Gaza when Israel was created in 1948. Many of them fled from their homes and they've not been allowed to return today. So what's the guarantee that Israel is going to allow them back in? And besides, anyone can say, I'm not going to be a part of a Hamas and whatever, and just to get back into Gaza and then foment trouble. So there is no guarantee that it would even work that way. Stanley.
Well, there's no guarantee, but I think I happen to have watched that little press conference that Trump gave. The thing that worried me is the U.S. would own it. I mean, he literally used the word own. So that kind of, in my opinion, goes against some of that America First stuff. I mean, he's going to turn it into the Middle Eastern Riviera. So, I think Dershowitz is actually thinking it more through than Trump did.
Yeah, in a sense, he's thinking it through in terms of practicality, in terms of okay, what are the solutions? But Trump is thinking it more like a businessman. He's just going to own this land and turn it into some sort of resort, and he's going to make money from it. He isn't looking at the other aspects, right? But even at that, even if Dershowitz is thinking about it in a more robust way, that this conversation even comes up in the first place is a terrible idea, because Piers Morgan is going to ask Dershowitz later on that would you allow the transfer of Jews out of Israel just so peace can be attained? And of course he would not allow that. So if the goal is peace and you think that a transfer of people is what is going to guarantee that peace, then you should be able to say, if that is what is good for the Palestinians, should also be good for the Jewish people in Israel. But he's not going to agree to something like that. So that's the kind of double standards that really gets at
one other problem is that Egypt, Jordan, they don't want the Palestinians. The bigger problem is, where is he going to send them?
But why should they want the Palestinians? Palestinians are not Egyptians. They're not Jordanians. Even if they're Arabs, they're not citizens of those countries, right? So,
Hamas is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, I mean, there's some issues with even being associated with Hamas. Mm-hmm. So, at first I thought he was just kind of thinking outside the box, which, I guess you get used to it. Trump is Trump, but that people are taking it seriously
Yeah,
is concerning. I mean, why
very,
would
very
we?
concerning.
All the United States is going to do, this is not going to be peaceful. And the only way you're going to be able to do this is with troops.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, um, Dershowitz is old. Um, I just, I just
No,
don't
no,
see how this is going to be workable.
no. I think I've been seeing a pattern where people's bad behavior have been excused on different things. You just said Dershowitz its whole. That's not an excuse
Well,
for
no,
him
I mean
supporting something
old that
like this.
shouldn't be taken seriously.
Okay, I get that. I get that.
That all the critics have been presenting are not viable. It's just doing the same thing over and over again. That's Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. We need new thinking. We need
But as Israel tried, as Israel tried to go move forward with a two-state solution and it's failed. I mean, I think there's been a United Nations resolution every year for the creation of a Palestinian state, which Israel and the United States keep vetoing. So he's talking as if there's no other alternative on ground aside the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And it's insane to say that nothing else has been tried. The most viable solution at this point in time is a two-state solution, right? And even though talks had failed in the past, doesn't mean that it's going to fail now. At least I read some of the interaction, Arafat and the other time they were trying to do the Camp David Accord. Part of the reason why that failed was because the terms were not clear to Arafat. He couldn't just agree to anything, and then Rabin was assassinated, and the whole thing was called off. It was made to seem as if Arafat wasn't giving any commitment. The letter he wrote to I think Clinton at that point in time was very clear. Actually asking for clarifications that, okay, what exactly do you mean by this? It was the letter. What I saw in that letter was a man who was willing to work with the Israelis for a peaceful solution, but he needed guarantees. So all those things were drafted by the Israelis and by the Americans, of course, for the benefit of Israel. And you don't expect him to just accept terms and conditions to the detriment of his people. Then all those years of struggle would be for nothing. But it's crazy.
fresh thinking. I'm happy that President Trump came up with this idea. Now let's think about it. Now let's deconstruct it. Now let's go step by step. Let's see if we can accept parts of it, accept other parts of it. Let's see whether or not we can do something different in Gaza rather than return it to the status quo. Already the heads of Hamas said they're going to do October 7th again and again and again. And remember, too, people say it's against international law to move populations. Well, was it against the international law for Churchill to do it, for Roosevelt to do it? Are the same people complaining when the Hamas charter calls for the transfer of populations out of Israel and Jews being eliminated from the river to the sea? We have to have bold new thinking. We should.
So for me, this is a whataboutism. And yes, in my opinion, it was against international law, or it should have been against international law for Churchill to have proposed something like that. And I have said vehemently over and over again that asking Israeli Jews to leave Israel, it's not a feasible solution because it is their country, however it has come about. Jewish Israelis that's their country now. So you can't ask them to leave. That's not something I would agree with. I can say that, but can Alan say that about the Palestinians? Can Alan say that the Palestinians have a right to that land just as much as Israeli Jews currently have a right to that land? No, he wouldn't say that. So that's the double standard and his stupid whataboutism that he's currently doing. Stanley.
Well, the question I would have is, I don't know that much about international law, but I'm guessing that law came about after 1947. I
Exactly.
I I mean, back in those days before the UN existed, I don't know. He should tell us whether it was international law or not. I'm guessing it wasn't.
Yeah. And besides, some of the terrible things that happened that time may have informed why such laws were put in place. So
shouldn't use cliches like ethnic cleansing and transfer of population. We should think hard about what the realistic options are. None of them are cost free. All of them will involve suffering. The question is, what's more important, place or peace?
Okay.
What's more important,
So
geography or trying to bring about a resolution to an age-old problem?
Okay, so I hear you. Here's what I would say to you, though. You say it's not about ethnic cleansing or any of these things, but if it was the other way around, Alan, and be honest, if the big idea from the President of the United States was actually, we know how to resolve this, we're going to move everyone in Israel somewhere else, right? Hypothetically, we're going to move the millions of Israelis, they're going to move, and the Palestinians will get to, have that land, or they'll share that land or whatever that they're moving from. You would lead the call of this is ethnic cleansing. You would say this is unbelievable, shocking, appalling, and should never be contemplated. And I think if you're honest, you would admit that. So I want you to put yourself in you can answer the question yourself, but I assume you would say that. But if you're a Palestinian, you don't see this as the great rosy future. You see this as you being kicked out of your land, and it confirms the very fears you've been expressing about members of the cabinet like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and so on, who have been talking in this way for quite some time, that they just wanted to get rid of the Palestinians.
Stanley, what do you think about this point made by Piers?
Not much. I'm actually looking up the law. Apparently there was a fourth Geneva Convention, which I'm trying to figure out what date it was. I'll find out in a minute. I just think that I actually think that deconstructing this idea serves no purpose other than just talking to Piers Morgan about it, because I just did. The problem is that none of the parties who want to do this relocation are good faith parties, in my opinion. The United States is not a good faith party. They're not a neutral party in wanting to relocate. They're pro-Israel. So, I mean, this isn't a decision or the implementing of whatever they decide to do. If the United States and Israel's involved, and several Arab countries, it's not going to be good faith. Palestinians are going to lose every time. Okay, nobody's thinking what's best for the Palestinians.
Yeah. And I think it's racist to just suggest that just because they are Arabs, then they are the same with other Arabs. Other Arabs should just naturally take them in. It's
yeah, that's
crazy.
That's a bit yeah, you're right. It's a bit racist. Arabs are Arabs.
Look, this wasn't an idea that Smotrich or Ben-Gvir or even Netanyahu came up with. It's an idea that the current administration came up with. Remember too that
now it doesn't have to be an idea that they came up with. They are sympathetic to this idea. They have made comments or statements relating to this idea in the past. So it doesn't matter whether they came up with the idea or not. It's not a function of who came up with the idea. It's how valid that idea is, and this idea doesn't make any sense.
Just as a side note, I just found out the Fourth Geneva Convention was held in 1949, so it was after Israel was founded.
See,
Palestinians resulted from Palestinians attacking Israel in 1948. They produced the Nakba. Palestinians would have been allowed to stay in Israel, hundreds of thousands of them, if they hadn't attacked Israel.
But that's not true. I mean, that's just blatantly false. If that was the case, then there would have been no need to partition the land. There would have been let's just create a country where both Arabs and Jews would live. But the express goal of Zionism was to create a Jewish majority state. And they even talked about land swaps, where they were going to swap lands with where you have majority Arabs and where you have majority Jews. There are going to be some land swap and so on and so forth. Even righteous, I think this book by Benny Morris, the Jewish Israeli historian, said something that that the plans of Zionism would have led to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, right? Maybe not killing them, but in terms of a transfer of people. Because remember the sort of mentality that the Jews at that time had coming out of Europe. They needed a place they could absolutely control, given the fact that they had, and I can understand that fear, being that whenever they were a minority in any country, they were always oppressed, they were killed, and so on and so forth. So it's for them, it made sense that they had a place that they had control over in terms of territorial integrity and so on and so forth. So it was in the nature of the founding of Israel to actually cleanse the Palestinians from certain parts of the land. So, and besides, Jewish militias were already sacking Arab villages before the war fully broke out in 1948. Even the King David Hotel bombing and so many other things. These things were happening, but he's making it seem as if the Palestinians just attacked. They were the ones who instigated this thing. If they attacked anyway, they did it for a reason, because they saw this as a threat to their land, that someone is coming from Europe and trying to create a country on their own land. There's nobody on this earth that's going to allow something like that and not going to react to it. So it's just a totally dishonest framing. Stanley.
If I could find, there's a documentary I watched a few years ago about the Nakba, and I noticed that, if the Palestinians hadn't attacked, well, he doesn't mention why they attacked in the first place.
Exactly.
If I can ever find that documentary, I'll get it to you. It's really kind of heartbreaking.
And so, no, Israel is an established state. It didn't start the October 7th war. When you start a war, the way Germany started with Czechoslovakia, your civilians pay a price. And
So you see what this guy is. This guy is a terrible person. A really, really, really terrible person. He's saying that just because a military operation takes place, that it is okay for the civilians of that military of that this thing to pay a price. That's absolutely devilish. If you look at America today, and if you look at the shit that America has done in different parts of the world, does that justify an attack on American civilians because of what the US government has done in other parts of the world? Is he not agreeing with terrorists that you could target civilians for what their government has done? Is that not the motivating factor behind 9/11 and so many other horrible acts that you condemn today? That people are being targeted not because of what they did, civilians are being targeted not because of what they did, but because of what their government did. So is he a terrorist? Is he agreeing with terrorists? It makes absolutely no sense. And he keeps going back to what has happened in the past. Of course, those terrible things happen. It doesn't mean that they are the gold standard. Just because the Germans, millions of Germans in other parts of the world were persecuted for what Germany did and they were repatriated from where they were to back to Germany, doesn't mean that's the gold standard going forward. It's insane that he would even be making an argument like this. Stanley.
Well, I was going to say he's doing selective history. So I don't. Alan Dershowitz, even Alan Dershowitz, I'm more interested in what Trump's saying about it than Alan Dershowitz. Why Alan Dershowitz just doesn't retire and go out to pasture somewhere, I don't know. Both he and Giuliani are just problematic.
if the price is can result in real peace, if the people of Gaza can be returned, and I don't want to see the Palestinians of Gaza removed forever. I want to see them returned to a stable community with beautiful homes, with no tunnels, with no rockets, with demilitarization. That would be a first step to a two-state solution. Remember, I'm a strong supporter of the two-state solution.
But that's not what Donald Trump said, though, is it?
But
Alan, just to jump in there, if that's what Donald Trump had said, then fine. But actually what Donald Trump, when he was asked directly about what would happen with Palestinians, he said, well, some of them could come back, but his implication was very clear that most of them would not, that most of them would literally move to Jordan and Egypt, both of whom their leaders have said, we're not doing this. And the general reaction across the Arab world is one of absolutely not happening in a million years. So
And I heard that Britain recently said that they're not going to take in any Palestinian refugees, and it seems like most of the worst aren't going to take any of these refugees. So why are you asking them to move if you're not going to take them in? I mean,
Exactly.
if the US says, you know what, we're going to take in 2.3 million Palestinians to the US. If you want to move here, come. I mean, that would seem like a reasonable proposal, right? But
Okay,
to
well,
just tell them
Charles, you
without,
do realize Trump literally won. Like one of the top one or two or three reasons he won was he's going to deport a bunch of people. We will
yeah,
not be bringing in any Palestinians. I can
of course,
guarantee you that.
except the white South Africans that is made an
Yeah,
offer
exactly.
for them to come to the US, and they're just, I
And
just love the
Elon
reaction of the
Musk
South
is going to
Africans.
be their president.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you can just see the racial thinking in everything that Trump is doing. It's very, very clearly the Palestinians are in more danger than any white South African could ever be, like 1,000 times more than any white South African could ever be. But Trump thinks that it's a more pressing problem for you to take people who are privileged. They're so privileged that they are rejecting Trump's offer. They are so privileged in South Africa that they are scoffing, they are laughing at Trump. That why would we give this up? Why would we give up what we have in our country to come to America, to essentially become refugees in America? It didn't make any sense to start their lives all over again. But Trump
Well,
is not making that same offer to people who are literally at the brink of death.
well, I suspect the South Africans would. Part of their thinking is that, well, gee, black people in America are like empowered. We can't be moving there.
Crazy stuff.
I just think it's I get the boldness, I get the vision, I get if you're an Israeli, this makes perfect sense and it's great. But if you're a Palestinian, you're like, hang on, so we're getting kicked out, and most of us forever, from what they see as their homeland. And again, I just ask you, if it was the other way around, how would you feel?
Well, first, it wouldn't be the other way around because Israel has lived in peace. It has never
Now,
attacked.
it wouldn't be the other way around because you have the power, because you have the leverage, not because Israel is lived in peace. Israel, I read today that there was a child that was killed in the west in Rafah, a child killed by an Israeli sniper. For a sniper to shoot a child in the chest has to be a deliberate action.
Right.
Good Lord. And these things are happening in the West Bank. There, I saw a video of whether it was a Hellfire missile being shot at a camp, a Palestinian camp, where people were just playing football in the camp, and a bomb just dropped on them. And you're acting as though Israel is a totally neutral party. They have no fault in all of this. It's just the Palestinians attacking for no apparent reason. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I suspect, essentially what Donald Trump is proposing, you're familiar with the term gentrification.
Yep.
Essentially you take someplace that's a ghetto or just someplace that's just destroyed for one reason or another, you restore it, rebuild it, gentrify it, and then you price, the quote riffraff out of it. That's essentially what he seems to want to do with Palestine. The people wouldn't be able to afford, to move back if Trump Trumpifies it, makes it high value real estate. And I suspect what happens is once that real estate gets gentrified in this hypothetical, Israel just assumes it. They just say,
Exactly.
hey, it's high value now. It's been gentrified. Let's just go ahead and annex it.
Exactly. That's the plan. That's the plan.
attacked its enemies. It has always been the recipient of attacks. It's only the Palestinians who say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free of Jews.
But Israel attacked Egypt in the 1967 war. There was a preemptive attack. Israel has attacked Iran multiple times. Israel attacked Syria when Assad fell without provocation. So he's just giving he's giving false facts. It's not true that Israel is just sitting down there and they're just attacking it. That's absolutely not true.
Well, I kind of have to wonder why Piers Morgan doesn't get someone that's a little bit more official. And maybe he couldn't, maybe nobody's willing to talk about this except for Alan Dershowitz or people like that. I would feel much more comfortable with someone in a more official capacity. To my mind, Dershowitz is just kind of like a loose cannon, and he's just sitting there. He's just sitting there as an interested an interested third party.
For Piers, of course, all this is a show for Piers. It's not really anything
Sure.
substantive. Piers isn't trying to change the world or do anything. That's why he brings in very crazy people, hyperbolic people, just to have a shouting match with them. That's why he'll bring on someone like Andrew Tate. He'll bring on someone like that other girl, that white girl that was that red pill girl, and the other. So it's
pearly things.
Yeah, just pearly things. So he's not a serious. He's not a serious person. All this is just entertainment.
They're the ones who want ethnic cleansing. Israel's responding to it by saying, wait a minute, let's not do any ethnic cleansing. Let's clear areas. This would be my idea, and it's an idea I would propose to President Trump if he asked me, and he has asked me from time to time about my ideas. Clear certain areas, say the south, the Rafah area, clear it, move all the Palestinians out, give them tremendous.
But do you understand what this means for people? For them to be tossed about like sheep, right? When this war started, their lives were uprooted. Israel would tell them, move to the south of Gaza, and they would move. And while en route, they'll be bombed. And then Israel will tell them, move again. So people's businesses are disrupted, children's schools are disrupted, normal day-to-day life and function disrupted. And you think it's fine, it's okay to just move people like chess pieces on a board. Would he accept that kind of living for Israelis, for Jewish Israelis? He's not going to, but he thinks it's okay for another people to be subjected to that kind of condition.
Things are always easier said than done, but to your point about the schooling, if I recall, the Palestinians in general are really young people. Like, the median age or average age is really young. You're basically creating a generation or generations of people that will have no schooling. Basically, you're creating a whole people that are just nothing but refugees.
And
they have nothing.
That's fertile ground for extremism and recruitment to take place, because these people, they have nothing to turn to. It's the reason why Hamas will be so popular is because that's the only productive thing they have to turn to right now. No, they don't have a stable life. Do you think people who have good businesses, who have flourishing careers, are going to look at all that and say, let me throw that away and go become a terrorist? Maybe a few of them might.
Moved away decades ago. I mean, the elites, the Palestinians who were, quote, elites, are long gone.
Yeah, true.
Compensation packages, hundreds of thousands of dollars, give them beautiful homes in Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Egypt. Let them decide. And if they decide to stay, well, that would be fine. If they decide to come back, then they can come back if they can clear vetting.
Now, can you see how he was mentioning other people's country, but he never mentioned Israel? He never mentioned give them homes in Israel. So why do you think why do you think the Syrians and the Jordanians and the Egyptians would accept them in and it wouldn't be problematic? If this is a problematic population, if they are causing problems for Israel, why do you think they wouldn't cause problems for Egypt? Oh, they'll be like, we're all Arabs, so no problem. We're not going to fight you. We're not going to create problems. So just brothers. It's racist for him to even make, and the fact that they haven't even consulted these other countries before saying all these things. They haven't consulted Egypt or Syria or Lebanon or Jordan on this. They haven't even made this proposal to them. They're just saying, no, we're just going to send people to your country. It's
Well,
wild.
I'm I think I heard, or I'm just gonna simply guess that Trump is in a mood to use economic warfare to
Mm,
coerce countries to do what he thinks they ought to be doing.
mm,
It seems like I heard something about military aid to Egypt. Like,
mm,
hey, if you don't take some Palestinians, your military aid is going to be cut off or curtailed.
mm,
So that's what Trump will do, or, that's probably going to be on the table. Hey,
mm.
we'll cut off aid if you don't do what we want to do or what we want you to do. So I just don't think, I just, I just want to see how this develops. Um, and I understand Pierce has a show to do, but this is really just kind of sitting around, two old men spitballing.
Mhm.
There's
I-
nothing serious about this,
Of course
interview,
not.
and Dershowitz should not be taken seriously.
Of course not. Of course not. I would that countries actually called Trump's bluff and say, you know what? Yeah, take your age. Like, because on the long run, Trump Trump is Trump is building the immune system of countries, of alliances. That's what he's doing right currently. If people begin to see, especially with the European Union and with NATO, if they begin to see the US as an unreliable partner, they're going to look for alternatives. They're going to, how can we move forward in this in our security arrangements without a United States? And that is only going to accelerate the decline of US power. Because if you there's no bargaining chip anymore. If you say you want to withdraw your dollars, okay, withdraw your aid and the rest, and you know those countries are not going to just capitulate just because you took your aid away. So I think Trump should be careful when he's very overtly threatening countries over something like aid money, which is essentially US buying goodwill. Once you take that away, the goodwill is gone. There's really no reason why anybody should be listening to you. And if there is anything I really want to happen is for this aid to stop. This aid that the US gives to other countries, I really, 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 really want it to stop. I really wish it to stop.
Well, I
Because
think I think you've got a lot of people who in America who will agree with you. He's already in the middle of disbanding USAID. So foreign aid is actually on the chopping block, um, and I'm not very sad about that happening. At a minimum, it needs to be reassessed what goes
Mhm.
where. That's not a bad thing to do, but I
Yeah.
I just think when I heard Trump say it, first thing I thought is, this is never going to happen. It's a great idea. I like that he's kind of thinking outside the box, but it's very reminiscent of those conferences, of uh, those interviews or conferences or whatever you want to call during COVID.
Mhm.
He was
Yeah.
coming up with the craziest, stuff. Um, I don't know how I don't know how many of those you watched, but it was when he was suggesting, injecting people with bleach, or, somehow or another figuring out how to get sunshine, because COVID doesn't live out in the open air and direct sunlight. It doesn't do well. He was just coming up with all kinds of policies or policy ideas that were just outlandish, and this is just in that vein.
The problem with Trump is that, if you were just a regular guy saying stupid things like that, people. give you, but not the president who has access to literally any information on that topic that he could get. Making proposals as insane as that shows a deliberate commitment to ignorance. Like you deliberately do not want to get the correct information. It's wild.
Well, but his fans eat it up. And he doesn't have they're not just voters, they're fans.
Yeah. And they're not just fans, it's a cult.
If they can demonstrate that they're not Hamas terrorists, if they can demonstrate that they do not want to take up arms, that they are not in favor of ethnic cleansing of Jews, let them come back region by region to an area that has no tunnels, that tunnels can't be built, create a situation with underground wires and everything to prevent the building of tunnels. Let's rebuild Gaza. It literally can be Singapore in the Mediterranean. Remember, Israel left Gaza in 2005. They left it completely until Hamas took over. And they could have built a beautiful seaport. I have been in Gaza. I've eaten in Khan Yunis.
But the thing that they don't really say is, why did Israel leave Gaza and how did Israel leave Gaza? First of all, Israel left Gaza not out of the goodness of its heart for the Palestinians in Gaza, but because there was very serious conversations at that time of granting rights to the Palestinians in Gaza, because they were essentially Israelis but without rights to vote. So Israel saw that absorbing 2 or 3 million Palestinians is going to dilute the quote unquote Jewish nature of Israel, and decided to just cut it off. That's what they did. And they did it in such a manner that there was a vacuum. Of course, when you leave without transferring to any constituted civil authority, what's going to take its place is chaos. There were no succession plan in place for Gaza when they pulled out. And what happened was the natural, what would naturally happen. Those who have power, those who can bully other people, terrorists, criminal elements, they're going to come in and fill in the gaps. And that's exactly what happened in Gaza. So essentially, Hamas is a problem that was created by the Israelis.
Well, he also neglects to mention Israel had a blockade. So building materials, there were certain types of things that were dual purpose that Israel basically blockaded. You remember years ago, Turkey, Israel and Turkey kind of got into a kerfuffle because Turkey basically wanted to run the blockade. You don't remember that, do you?
No,
but yeah, Turkey basically got pissed off at Israel because Israel would not let stuff, building materials, just all kinds of stuff that Israel just wouldn't allow in. So there was no way to rebuild because they couldn't get building supplies in. Now, there was probably a reason. Israel scared that stuff's going to get smuggled in and all. However, for him to say that, gee, they didn't do anything with the land, that's disingenuous. They couldn't if they wanted to.
Very, very.
I've eaten in Gaza City. It could be magnificent. And I think Trump, maybe naively, believes that could happen again. But if it could happen piece by piece with a right to return, but a right to return if you're not a terrorist from Hamas, and if you're prepared to lay down arms and live in peace with Israel, 10 years from now.
Whatever happened to that right of return to the Palestinians who were driven from Israel? Nah, nothing came of it. And you expect them to believe you now? Oh, man.
Well, the problem is you have a whole bunch of young people. I mean, you have did you hear about that terrorist attack? Basically, it was a domestic terrorist in New Orleans.
Of recent?
This was back in January, I think it was, an American who I think he was former Army, all this stuff. He just basically was in despair, a lot of things in his personal life going bad. He got radicalized online. Now, this is a guy who was born in America, a Black American, who got, and he was in his 40s, high 30s or low 40s, got radicalized. So what do you think is going to happen when these people, exercise a right of return. They go back to Gaza, and you know what? The only jobs they're going to have is serving in the hotels
Exactly.
Trump builds. You know, you can commit to a lot of things, but what happens a year down the line when you
Exactly.
get radicalized? I mean, they're not going to be terrorists when they return, but after they live there for a while and figure out that, hey, I can't, I can't make headway in this
Mhm.
newly built resort, they're going to get radicalized.
Exactly. And I know that Alan and Trump and whatever, they know this for a fact. So this is just a smoke screen. They know they're never going to let the Palestinians back in because they know
And if you
letting
want
them
to
back
use
in.
history, use the American Revolution. You know, England wouldn't let, the Americans or future Americans do certain things, so they got radicalized and
Yeah, it's, the problem I am having with the Israelis is that they forget this. They forget that power doesn't stay in one place forever. They
well, I think to a
forget.
certain extent they're denying Palestine. This is a real kind of like a critical theory sort of argument,
Mm,
but they're basically treating these Palestinians like they're not human.
yeah,
Okay, like, hey, you know what? We're going to give them a right of return and we're going to build them like a Riviera type place to return to. How could they not be happy? What?
exactly.
These people aren't like, these people are human beings.
And that's the point I keep making about when people are saying um, you want to do something for people. Well, are you not? Okay, take African Americans for example. They say, well, African Americans are the most successful black group. If not for slavery, they wouldn't be enjoying what they're enjoying in America today. I'm like, why was it your decision to make for them? What makes you think that that was the most? That's what was most desirable to those slaves who were moved from Africa hundreds of years ago. Why was it your decision for them? At times, freedom is more important than economic success. Let people figure things out for themselves. Like if they make a mess of it, well, let them live with the consequences of it. But do not impose it on them on the ground that it makes their lives better because it is totally dehumanizing them, saying that they cannot think for themselves, they cannot make the
You're
decisions
right.
for themselves or what they want to become. No.
Well, when if this ever comes to fruition, the first thing MAGA's gonna do is call it affirmative action for Palestinians. You're spending all this money on Gaza, but you're not spending it in Appalachia. So it'll just be the same old, tired arguments. Why are we helping Gaza out? You know, when we're
Yeah,
not helping our own people out.
it's crazy.
Finally have a solution that would then enable Israel to move toward a two-state solution with the West Bank, relationships with Saudi Arabia. It's the beginning. Let's not just reject it by using terms like ethnic cleansing, because
Well,
those
it's interesting.
terms
I mean, look,
usually have been used
okay,
in
but look,
Sudetenland, and Sudetenland was a success,
yeah, but
a great
look, the reason
success.
the official definition of ethnic cleansing is the forced removal or killing of a population, ethnic group, or religious group against their will. And it's pretty clear from the immediate reaction from
That happened
Palestinians
in
that they this would be against their will. Therefore, the forced removal of a population is by the definition ethnic cleansing. I mean, it's not like people are
no,
exaggerating. That's exactly what it would be if it's against their wishes.
no, that's not
Exactly.
true. International law is based on precedent. And I don't think anybody has accused Churchill and Roosevelt of ethnic cleansing.
Why does he keep going back to Churchill and
I
Roosevelt?
don't know.
Those men.
Mainly because he thinks they're icons and nobody's gonna say they were ethnic cleansing. The thing is that what he's not talking about is the Nakba, which
Mm,
was forced removal.
mhm.
So why doesn't he go back to that precedent?
Exactly. And how much peace did that produce? How much stability did that produce? This guy.
when they moved involuntarily millions of ethnic Germans who were causing a problem.
I mean, talking about Churchill is such a terrible, terrible, terrible example, considering his track record. The only
Yes.
reason why Churchill is seen as some sort of hero was because Hitler was fundamentally a much more evil person, at least in our immediate face. But if you look at what he did in India with the Bengal famine, where millions of Indians starved to death, there is no way you can say that Churchill was a good person. He was a rabid anti-Semite. He was a terrible person. So he's not even an example to even be broached or used as some sort of a shining light in any sort of
Well,
conversation.
well, Charles, and probably since you've known me, I have always complained that leaders or talking heads like these two, they depend on people not knowing this history. Okay, all you're taught in American schools is what a great guy Churchill was. And you only have so much time. You don't
Yeah.
get to teach, these are survey courses. But the thing is if you didn't know what you know about
Mhm.
Churchill's, total history, not just the World War II stuff, you would buy it hook, line, and sinker.
Yep. So they depend on the ignorance of people to push their narratives.
Yeah, and people always deliver.
They were the beginning of the Second World War, and the problem has been solved. International law is flexible. Peace is more important than geography. So let's not get caught up in technical definitions.
Yeah. So why doesn't the Israeli don't they move to California? Why don't they move? I mean, the US is a very big place. They could move to Texas, right? They could literally create Israel in Texas. They have a lot of
They got a
Zionist
lot of desert.
Christian. Yeah. So they could go to the Nevada desert and create an Israel there if geography is not important. The reason why the Zionist Jews wanted to move back to Palestine was because of the historical ties they had to that land. It meant something deeply to them, religiously and spiritually. So you can't just say geography isn't important, that it's peace that's the most important thing. Because if
Yeah,
that were
but
the
see,
case,
the thing is that Europe was all for it because they wanted to get the Jews the hell out of there.
exactly, it solved their Jewish problem
It
and then it
wasn't.
created
It
an.
wasn't. Oh, it was a win-win.
And anyone seeing the Europeans at that time supporting the state of Israel would have been thinking they are doing it out of the goodness of their heart. No, they were trying to solve their Jewish problem. It's crazy.
Definitions that are anachronistic and that have never been applied. India, Pakistan, we had millions of people just.
Who knows that maybe part of the reason why many of these European countries are so ardent supporters of Israel is they don't actually want the repatriation of Jews back to Europe, because many of these Jews have either dual citizenship or they have parental ties to places like Poland, Germany, and the rest. So maybe some of them might be like, if Israel fails, these guys are going to come back to Europe, and we don't want that. So Israel has to succeed. This is me just thinking some wild thoughts, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Placed against their will. In Königsberg, every single German was replaced. Was there objection to that? No, that was Churchill's. Accepted it. No, that Roosevelt accepted it. These were accepted by international law of the United States. Let's do what's best for the Palestinians. Let's do what's best for the Israelis. Let's do what's best with peace. Let's not just reject the idea by putting a label on it. It is not in violation of the precedents of international law. It's been done in the past with great success. And the best criteria for something under law is, did it work? And it worked in Sudetenland. It worked in Pakistan. And it is still working in Königsberg.
Alan Dershowitz, fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it.
So it's crazy what's the sort of conversations people have on things like this, the sort of ideas that people have on things like this. It's just wild. And you think that these are educated people who should know better, but obviously
Well, one
ideology is more
observation,
important than.
um, you know, I have not heard this idea taken seriously anywhere. I mean, you would think And maybe I just haven't been paying attention, but I talk a lot of politics and culture,
Mm, mm,
day to day, and I honestly I'm not sure people are actually taking it as seriously as Alan Dershowitz is.
yeah. And
Could
they
be,
shouldn't.
I could be wrong, but it's not hitting the newspapers every day.
Yeah.
There's not a countdown to relocation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stanley. I think this
You're
would be a
welcome.
good
Good
place to
seeing you.
draw this show to a close. So I'll catch you in another live stream.
Okay, take it easy,
Bye for
Charles.
now. Yeah, bye.
Oops, let's see here.